Hello and welcome to the Daily Lawyer podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jenna Krishnan. I am your host, and today is yet another episode in our daily story series. If you've been following this series, you know that this is a new series that we launched mainly to get people, non lawyers, on the podcast to speak about certain losses that they had or certain decisions that they made that probably was not so conducive to their business or their lives because they were not aware of the legalities or they did not know whom to go to seek such information and so on. I wanted to have these conversations out in the open so that we all realize what our risks are and what are the things that we can do to avoid making these mistakes in our own lives and in our own businesses. To that end, we have a fantastic guest with us today, somebody I really admire and someone I really like as a person, like who she stands for. I am very happy to welcome Sneha Arvind on the podcast. Sneha is a mindfulness practitioner and a coach, and she helps people make mindfulness their first habit. I can attest to it because I am actually Sneha's client in this regard, and I keep telling her how much she has helped me, uh, and she will help. I'm sure any of you who want to get connected with Sneha. But just to go back to her, Sneha is a chartered accountant by profession. She was working with Capgemini, a large IT company, where she sought to leverage her financial knowledge for the IT sector. Though she enjoyed the intellectual challenge of her job, she probably felt that she knew somewhere that she didn't fit in over there. She's always been spiritually inclined, having been introduced to and encouraged in spirituality by her mother. In 2019, Sneha was fighting depression after the loss of a loved one. And one of the major contributors that helped her overcome this loss was a 10-minute daily meditation and yoga practice that she kept up despite everything else that was going on in her life. When she saw the advantages that meditation had on her, she decided to make it part of her lifestyle. She did a yoga teacher's training course. She went for Vipassana meditation, and since then she has not let go of the meditation practice that has helped her stay grounded and connected. We saw how meditation and mindfulness changed her life and helped her grow in every single situation and decided to bloom like a lotus. She decided to start her own venture in this field called Arvinda. And she started it during the peak of COVID, but she's now here having a fantastic response to Arvinda. I know I can attest to it personally. Sneha, welcome to the Daily Lawyer podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jenna, for such a heartwarming introduction and most importantly for having me on your podcast. It really means a lot to be here.
But thank you. I know we have had conversations offline, which is what led to this.
Yeah.
Discussing about you coming on the podcast because you have so much to say, which I think is so relatable to so many people, especially all the experiences that you've gone through in your personal life and in business. So it's amazing because you're the perfect representation. Like the Daily Lawyer, I started Daily Lawyer as to be like an umbrella for people, when there's a rainy day and they need to get protected in either their business or in personal life, and you actually represent both. So I'm excited to get into this conversation. Before we jump into the meat of the podcast, I want to ask you, can you just take everyone through your story a little bit? What is it that you do for a living? How did you get here?
Okay, so firstly, as you rightly said, I'm a chartered accountant by qualification, and I was working in the corporate for almost 7 to 8 years post my qualification. And but I always was inclined towards the working of the human mind, because what impacts our decision making, how is our behavior influenced by people around us or by our upbringing, our belief systems, etc. That's something which would always interest me. And in 2019, when I was going through the borderline depression, I came across a practice called Vipassana. And I was very intrigued by it because, and it was during these 10 days of Vipassana practice where you're completely cut out from the world, where you cannot talk to even the co meditators at the Vipassana center. I experienced myself the importance of being mindful, being in the present moment, and meditation. It helped me connect with my inner self, and it made me realize that how powerful my mind is. So that's when I decided that, if I can do it, everybody can do it, because no matter caste, religion, sex, age, each one of us has different challenges in life. And, uh, knowingly or unknowingly, we kind of end up being succumbed to these challenges. But the power lies within us to overcome them. So I was like, if I can do it, definitely everybody else can do it. And that kind of motivated me to switch my full time corporate job from being a CA to a mindfulness coach, wherein I assist people towards building mindfulness, their first habit, how they can bring small, tiny little changes in their everyday life and become mindful and see how it transforms their life. And so, yeah, this is in a nutshell that what I do currently as a mindfulness coach, and I practice this coaching under the name of Arvinda. And although I am based in Mumbai, but my working is majority of my working is online. So, which means people from any part of the world can still,
Access.
access. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know also for a fact that you not only work with adults but also kids, because
Yes.
my own daughter is your client, I think, and she loves you, as you already know. So Sneha, I want to just sort of take you a little back, because we want to you did mention that you were fighting depression, and I want to uh, can you speak about what is it that what happened in your personal life that led you to that point, and at that time, sort of, what were the challenges that you were personally facing?
So what happened was in 2018, just 6 months after my marriage, I lost my husband. And it was, when in Hindi there's a dialogue, कि पैर के नीचे से जमीन निकल जाती है. It was that feeling for me, because it was a very sudden death. It was an accidental death. So you're not prepared for it, right? I mean, somewhere you know that you're going to die one day, your loved ones are going to die, but you're not prepared for that unless you're seeing somebody ailing. And that was a huge traumatic shock for me, because you have just started a new life and you are planning for the future. You have certain vision, you have certain goals in life to accomplish together as a couple, and all of these things that you can think of. And all of a sudden, the next one fine morning, you get a call, and the whole reality for you has changed. And so that was the most traumatic incident that happened. And during this grieving process, unfortunately, in our society, we don't openly talk about grief, which is again one of the things that I really want to encourage through Arvinda, to normalize conversations about.
Absolutely.
Because when people grieve, either people don't know how to respond, how to what to say, what not
Yes,
to say to
yes,
people who are
yes,
grieving, or they just avoid talking about it. Or if you see somebody crying, you're like, oh, don't cry,
yeah,
this has happened. But sometimes it's
yeah.
important to talk about these things, to talk about these difficult emotions. And during that grieving process, I realized that it had affected I was affected not just by his loss, but all the trauma, all the shock that I had when I lost my mom at a young age came gushing to me like a tsunami. Because, when mom's demise had happened, I had just cleared my 10th examinations. And, I was on this role of focusing on my career, studies, getting into a good college, and all of these things. So that time I didn't get enough time to process that. And now all of a sudden it came on to me. And human mind is such that you can't have a control on your thoughts or emotions, but however you do have a control
That's
of
true.
how you respond to them.
Yes,
But ab aa to gaya, now you have to learn how to respond, right? So that that was the duration in 2019, which was really difficult for me. So I didn't realize that it is actually a borderline depression until I went and saw a doctor, a therapist. Because you kind of again there, because there is no acceptance in the society, there is no normalization about these conversations, so you kind of brush it under the carpet. Oh, probably you just have mood swings, or probably it's just all in your mind. But it starts showing, it starts surfacing in your physical body. So that's when I had to seek help. And then I decided that I cannot let be a victim of this. I cannot be always on medication for the rest of my life. It's just one phase of my life. So that's when I leaned on spirituality yet again, leaned on meditation, leaned on, taking care of myself in a holistic way. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard what you've gone through. Honestly, I can relate intellectually to what you are saying. Of course, I cannot relate it to the emotional level. But like you rightly said, we have all had, everybody has had some amount of challenges. I have also had, uh, in the recent past, a different way, a different manner, where I felt like the carpet is pulled under my feet, to just translate what you said. But Sneha, in terms of the next step, right? When we are talking about legalities, for example, we know that your husband was working, you were working at the time, and of course, dealing with it at a personal level is something that you took care of it yourself by doing all of the meditation and the mindfulness practices. But there is the external also that you have to see, and that time your brain is like frozen, because you are like, I have to deal with this mess first, forget the
Yeah.
outside mess, but everything is time bound. So, what are some of the challenges that you faced, like, outside of this body, and the mess you're dealing with inside of yourself? What is it that you faced on the outside? What are some of the challenges that you faced on the outside? Uh, and then, okay, I'll ask you the next question then.
So as you rightly said, right, when you are going through a difficult phase or a traumatic phase in your life, you are so unknowingly into your head, because you're kind of trying to process it, and at the same time trying to do the things in your normal day-to-day life which you would have done otherwise, or sometimes you're struggling to do that. I think there are certain other things which needs attention, but because of all these things, we kind of overlook them. Uh, so in my case, because it was an accidental death, the process was completely different, because he was working, I was working, and it was all of a sudden, and it was just 6 months into our marriage. So all these formalities, we were just in the process of the name change, the changing of the address, and all these formalities that you do after marriage. And we were just in the process of doing all of that. And we didn't get time earlier, because, both of us kept traveling because of work. So we were like, okay, we'll do it eventually. But because this happened suddenly, it kind of, you know, one thing that I would say, that because there was not information was not easily available as to what is the process in such cases, it was a bit of a challenge. But thankfully, because I'm surrounded by people in legal profession and CA profession and all of that, it was easier for me. I had people who were taking care of this. So, that was the backbone for me. But I know certain instances, I know some people who had no support system, had a similar situation, but they didn't know what to do. And because of lack of awareness, lack of knowledge, uh, they just lost what they were entitled to. For example, there is a life insurance that is available on a credit card, and it depends on which credit card you have, what is the limit of your credit, and different other, terms and conditions, which I wasn't aware until that time. Of course, I had read about it, but never took it so seriously. So, such small things, or whether in case if you are a married couple and if there's an accidental death, whether the spouse, what all is the spouse eligible for, or if it's an accidental death and the person is single, not married, what all is their family entitled for or eligible for. So, that kind of awareness is not easily available for people. Is what I have seen or I have experienced around me. So that was, I think, the major challenge, because you're already going through a lot on a personal front. So this, kind of takes a back seat, because, you have to go through the whole process of understanding becoming aware of the process, understanding the process, and then actually implementing it. And it's, then again, a lot of people are involved in the whole process. So it kind of becomes very chaotic.
Yeah, that's true. I can just intellectually again understand about how it would have been not knowing what to do and not seeing the papers. And in your case, I know that you were both working in the same organization.
Yeah.
So Sneha, for those who probably don't know what, I mean, you in and through this journey, you have learned what are the entitlements that you have as a spouse. So can you share with the people what have you learned? Like what are the things that you're entitled to uh, in case of an accidental death, let's say, as a spouse or even the family? It's more or less the same.
I think most importantly in this case, where a spouse or the family has to check with the organization what all was the individual entitled for, because it's all mentioned in the employee contract. Uh, we tend to focus only on the PF part most of the times, and insurance if it's an accidental death. But there are more components to it. So I think most importantly, you have to check with the organization. There might be chances, just like how I had, that the organization will not be very clear in the first instance as to what all you are entitled for. So you have to do a thorough research from your end, and then simultaneously approach the organization, so that you are well informed that the information that you're receiving is correct information. For example, if you have registered your spouse, or even if you have not registered your spouse in your company records, but you have a legal marriage certificate, still your spouse is entitled to your PF, to your EDLI, the insurance amount, the pension amount, the what do you call it, the balance
So one
salary
second,
amount,
we should just clarify EDLI is employee linked insurance
employed
scheme. Yeah.
insurance.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So even if you have not registered your spouse in the company records but have a valid marriage certificate, that will also help you claim all these components. And or even your gratuity, for that matter, if you're eligible for that. So I think it's very important for people who are claiming this to be to have some basic awareness about it. And unfortunately, a lot of times people, they don't have that awareness uh, until they are into that profession, or they have educated themselves.
So this is all in terms of the office, like the within the sort of corporate structure, right? Where you say you have
Yes.
PF, you have insurance, you have you get if you're
EDLI.
eligible for gratuity, you also have pension.
Yes.
And then what about the salary? You know, the salary that the 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 person had to earn, let's say,
Yes.
uh, for that particular month. Or is there anything? Is there
Yes.
any like they give you extra salary? Is there anything like
No,
that?
so they don't give you extra salary. However, they give you the salary, the I forgot the term, but it's the settlement that they make, the full and final settlement, yeah, they make, which includes the salary and the leaves if they were not availed. So you can encash those leaves. So again, because I was working in the same organization, that came to my rescue, that I was able to validate the workings of all these components that we were entitled to. But unfortunately, I've seen instances where, there have been incorrect workings, because of which there is a difference in the compensation that the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say working, you actually mean calculation that is done by the HR
Yes,
department.
yes, yes.
Yeah. That,
Because errors are bound to happen, and it's always good to validate where is that amount, how is that amount derived. Because anybody could say a random amount, and because you are not in that headspace, you have to be, even though you have to be practical, but somewhere you're not in that headspace, you kind of also start thinking, oh, the person is no more, what is the point in having the money? That emotional part kind of starts taking over. But you have to think from a logical, from a practical perspective. So you have to also see that the workings are derived correctly.
So this is all under the corporate structure. But outside of the corporate structure, outside of the work, what else would you think? Like, for example, many of us take term life insurance, or many of us take some other type of insurance. For
Yeah.
instance, if you're driving a vehicle, there's a car insurance,
Yeah.
the vehicle insurance, which has a separate amount for death. You mentioned about the credit card. So what are the other things that you've probably come across which is available to you as a spouse or the family?
One is, Jenna, one is the credit card, as I mentioned earlier. And so check how many credit cards the person had, what kind of credit cards, and check with the bank. Again, you have to be behind their back to keep responding, because they don't, most of the times it's taken very lightly. I don't want to name specifically, but yes, that's what our experience has been. So check for the credit cards, as you rightly said, insurance. So if it's an accidental death, you were, driving your vehicle, check which insurance, what is the eligibility, how much is the sum insured in such cases, and some cases there is a period within which you have to, file that claim. So you need to be very sure of that you don't cross that validity period. Otherwise, there's a high possibility you might just miss out onto that. And in case of these accidental deaths, if there is any legal case that's happening, whether it's in the tribunal court or any other court for that matter, uh, so ensure that that is also processing at the correct in the correct way, and you are getting what you are entitled to, because there is a basic amount that you receive in such cases. For me, to be very honest, I had zero knowledge about how the courts will work, how these cases will run. But because I had people from the legal background in my family, so that's what came to my rescue.
Because you mentioned about the legal case, Sneha, there's one more thing I want to ask you here. There is sometimes the option of giving an interim compensation, at which will be sort of adjusted in the final amount.
Yeah.
So, is that something that you would advise people to claim as well? Because there are people, if you don't claim it, when you are filing your papers, you claim an interim compensation till the case is decided. Is that something that you have experienced?
I think in that case, I would suggest that take some legal advice, because it will be different for every, okay, it will be very subjective for every individual. So, again, in that case, go reach out to people in the legal field. There is nothing wrong. You don't have to be scared of. People are there in the legal field to help you. That's why they are there.
Yes, thank you. You spoke to my heart, because that's true. I was
No,
just
no, no. I can totally relate to it, because, Jenna, you know what? I used to be so scared about people in the legal fraternity because of the picture that Bollywood has painted for us. And I always used to think, oh my God, if you are talking to a lawyer, or if you are approaching a lawyer for something, it means there's definitely some mishap that has happened and some locha that has happened, because of which you need a lawyer. But it's not the case. They are genuinely out there to help you, to rescue you in whatever difficult situations you are in. And to be very honest, it's very difficult for a common man to know about all the rights they have, right? So there's no harm in reaching to a professional who is aware, who knows, who can educate you.
so true, Sneha. You spoke to my heart. Again, you gave me a beautiful segue to say why I started Daily Lawyer, because I faced this. It used to really pain me because people would not ask. Telling, why don't you ask? And at least, like, I know you have somebody in the family. I am in my own family, but then of course, people who know you ask, but then they'll come to you at the last, after everything is
Yes.
done, they'll come to you because they're like, oh. So anyway, I'm really glad you brought that up. In terms of getting legal help, I don't know whether you had this challenge because you have people in the family, But what would you say was your biggest challenge getting legal help or with lawyers?
So, one thing is, if you are experiencing something that I experienced, the news spreads out very fast. So there will be lawyers who will come and approach you. So, uh, and because your judgment is clouded at that point in time, it's very natural that you might end up taking a wrong decision. So I suggest, to seek out legal help from a person whom you can trust. Don't just go by, oh, there are two lawyers who have approached me. So, and they'll, of course, you find it difficult to, make that judgment in that moment. So take advice from people who have experience, um, and work with the legal advisor whom you can trust with all the information. I think that's one of the biggest challenge, because we are scared to approach legal people in the legal fraternity, because of which whatever comes our way, whoever comes in front of us approaches us first, we kind of hold on to it, right? So I think educate yourself, do your own research, and then take a decision.
That's very good advice. Now, I think I have possibly covered everything that I want to cover. And, oh no, I want to ask you one last question, because you mentioned about the difficulty that you had a little bit, not just you had, but I'm sure other people have, in terms of getting all this information. What
Yeah.
are your, what is it that you are entitled to, and so on. So, what is it that you'd like to see? First of all, do you believe that this information is readily available? A, and if you believe that no, it's not that readily available, then what is it that you would like to see in the world of the internet, easily accessible, where you can get information like this, let's say?
So, today information is available out there, but it's all scattered. It's not structured. Like, as I said, that even though I was in the same organization, I knew which components we were entitled to. But to, follow that whole process, there were so many third parties involved, and we had a really tough time, coordinating with the organization wherein me and my husband, both of us, were working for so long, with the third parties who were involved in this whole process, with the government offices who were involved in PF and pension and everything. It took us 4 years to clear all these components. And so, even though we had people who knew the process from the beginning, who knew which forms to fill, which documents to submit, we knew everything was in place. But still, for XYZ reasons, the process just kept taking longer and longer. So I think what I would love to see, or I wish to see, is, a platform where the information is structured. Say, for example, if it's an accidental death, what are the components you're entitled for. If it's some other, if it's an related to illness, what are the components you are entitled for. So, a platform which has structured information, and at the same time, you have professionals who will guide you, maybe not end to end, but guide you, as because everybody's case will be different, right? So a professional who will guide you depending on what your case is. So that will give you a whole picture of how the process would look like, what are the requirements, and how long, probably an approximate estimation of the time that it will take. And yeah, so like for example, even in case of filing up the forms and all, we knew these are the websites, the government websites that we need to go and fill the form and all of that. But it kept changing. The forms had changed a couple of times in the process, and because there was a delay from their end, we had to keep refiling again and again and again. So the supporting documents change, the fields in the forms change, everything changes, right? More or less, although it's the same, but you have to go through that whole time-consuming process again and again. And imagine the mental trauma you go through, because it might sound lame, but you are going through the same documentation of the deceased again and again and again.
Because it's not at all lame. It's quite it's something that we must, I hope, we can all work together and band together as a fraternity to come up with a solution for this, because like you, we, so many such people will be there who have to do this on a daily basis
Yeah,
for you. Even when it comes to property, right, like you
yeah.
have, that is a whole different challenge if you have to change the names in property and so on. So
I
yeah,
mean, even one thing, I'll just add here. See, in our case, because we are, we have that background, we have that information, we have that knowledge. So it's comparatively the challenges are less. Uh, but imagine for people who are of our parents' generation, there are so many things. They are not tech savvy. Not everybody is as tech savvy, and we have to accept it whether we like it or not, right? And because of it, because of all these changes, they don't know if something of this sort happens to their kids or anybody around them, or even their spouse for that matter, what to do, what all are they entitled for. And I'm saying this with a lot of pain in my heart, because I have seen few people in my organization wherein their families did not get what they were eligible for.
how sad, yeah. And that also a large organization which is very well known, has good processes, so like
Yes. It
uh,
could be because of various reasons,
yes.
because of probably delay from the organization, delay from the government, whatever it is, but the family did not get what they were eligible for.
How sad. I hope we can do something, and even through Daily Lawyer, I hope we can do something in terms of putting the information out
Yes.
there at least. Because I
Yeah.
think information is really powerful. Once you start speaking and
Yeah.
we have these conversations like this out,
Yes.
then people because Sneha, what you rightly said was, you are a CA, but you yourself had a very negative view of lawyers. We are actually sister professions and
Exactly.
we are
Exactly.
codependent on each other, but you yourself had this, and I'm sure this is common amongst everybody.
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
important to have these conversations, and I'm really grateful and very proud of you to come up and like really speak very openly about all of these things. And I know that it's not easy, but I'm really glad that you took the decision to do it, so thank you.
Thank you
Now,
so much, Jenna, for giving me this opportunity to share this, because I hope it helps people uh, who might be facing this uh, a similar situation, or who knows somebody who is going through this, because there's lack of structured information.
there's lack of structured information, I think,
Yeah.
in every aspect of anything to do with law.
Yes.
That's actually the it's true. So Sneha, now I we spoke about 2019, everything that you went through, but 2020 was a new phase, not just because COVID hit, but because you like transformed into something completely different from what you were. So can you talk to me a little bit about, you did mention about Arvinda and everything, but today you're an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur, what would you say are your three top priority items?
So, as an entrepreneur, most, and because I belong to a service industry, not a product industry, my topmost priority is to give value to my customers, to my clients, to add value in the services that they avail from Arvinda. And the second one is to maintain transparency in my business, because even though you're an entrepreneur, because sometimes we tend to take it for granted, because I'm the owner, so I'm entitled to do anything and all of those thoughts. But being an entrepreneur, it's equally difficult for you to manage everything. Like, you are taking care of the core business, you are doing the finance, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the admin things, and there are so many other things that you're doing. So it's very easy for you to lose track about the business. And the third most important uh, thing for me is documentation, because as I mentioned, that you tend to get lost. And I feel documentation is really important, because be it finance, be it your strategy, be it your even your standard operating procedures, like, if you have certain tasks which are repetitive in nature, you can have an SOP in place which will ease off the burden from you. And I think these are the top three priorities as a business owner or as an entrepreneur for me.
It's lovely. It's the priorities to have clearly your educational sort of experience, and the fact that you worked in a large organization with a lot of process, I'm sure informs a little bit of this decision. But I want to break, or rather focus a little bit more on the documentation angle. You did, yes, I, in terms of internal documentation to keep, to maintain the transparency that you mentioned was all right when you said that, whether it is the SOPs, whether it is your strategy, whether it is thoughts, however you want to organize all of that. But in terms of any sort of external documentation, why do you think that having any kind of documentation is important?
So, as I said, right, having the transparency in your business is very important because whether you are an entrepreneur or you're running a company, you have a team working under you. It's important to keep reminding yourself of the vision, the goals, the mission of your company, of your business. And at the same time, it's important for you as the business owner to know where your business stands, be it financially, be it in terms of what strategy you are opting, be it in terms of how it is performing overall. Because I'm sure today most of the business have social media presence in some form or the other, and it requires hell lot of effort to be there on social media. I mean, you know it for yourself, right? And so after putting in so much of efforts, where do you stand? It has to have some value, add some value, right? So I think documentation, that's where, in my opinion, documentation is really important because it gives you a 360-degree view of where you stand in different aspects in your business. And at the same time, if you have investors, it helps build confidence. And clients, your customers have confidence in you if you have that transparency. And the only way you can be transparent is when you have all the information. I mean, I still have, I maintain an attendance register for my clients. So once when I share it with my client that, hey, these are the number of sessions that you've done with me, and these are the number of sessions that are still pending. And she's like, oh, how do you know? I'm like, oh, I have an Excel for that, so that you don't miss out onto any session. And I have this attendance register from day one, from 2020 when I started till today. I have the attendance register. That also builds confidence, trust between the clients.
Absolutely. What about, um, of course, it builds confidence and trust between the clients in terms of all of this that you've done, but also when it also helps you be very clear, like your communication with your expectations, I mean their expectations of you, in terms of having it in a contract, or what are the things that they cannot come after you for instance, refunds. I know we discussed this offline,
Yes, yes,
refunds, or I mean, of course you have an attendance register, but there is this thing that, oh, I was supposed to come at 8:45, I came at 9, or I cancel last minute. And so I think
yeah,
it also helps to set expectations very clearly.
yes,
And one
yes,
thing, we are all, as human beings, I think, we take things a lot more seriously if it is written down.
yeah.
We like orally know, because we all know that there is not, that we are not living in times where that mera bachan hi hai shasan and all that. we,
Yeah.
we are not living in those times, but yeah.
And I mean, our brain is such a powerful tool. So why not use it the right way instead of using it just to store information? You have technology now. Just make optimum use of the technology to store all the information, right?
That's a very good point, Sneha, because it's not just why only put it in your mind, but then put it down, because that
Yeah,
not only helps you being more organized and transparent, but also it sets these expectations, very communicates very clearly to the, whether it's your clients, whether it's investors,
yeah.
whoever it is that you want to talk to, it sets that very clearly. So that's a really good point. Um, what do you think is the biggest mistake that people make when they are starting a business or they are running a business, in your experience? What are some of the biggest mistakes you have seen people make, or you have made it yourself and you like don't want others to make?
Okay. I think I'll speak about the mistake that I made. To take clear communication for granted. I mean, especially when you are a female entrepreneur, you know, you find it difficult to communicate, this is what my work structure is, or this is what my, you know, working style is, or even say, for example, asking for fees or communicating, oh, these are my fees if it's a service based industry. So I think that's one of the mistake that I made, because you know, you had earlier mentioned about somebody having a 8:30 session and joining in at 9. So these are some instances which I had actually experienced, wherein, you know, what, so I'll share a couple of instances where I made mistakes and learned from them. So one was, I had put it out, I had not put out, in fact, in the initial phase, about these rules that, you know, oh, if it's an 8 o'clock session, you're supposed to join within 15 minutes. If you don't join, you know, it's cancelled and all of that. Uh, so, so this particular client, I don't want to name the client, of course, had registered for a month-long program. So in my month-long program, we have 14 sessions for an hour. And for certain reasons, the client was not able to complete all the 13 sessions. There were few sessions that were left. I'm like, okay, you know, there are unforeseen situations. I'm like, okay, we'll do it once everything is settled in your end. But it so happened the client never came back to me. And the client came back to me after 5 to 6 months and was like, oh, you know, now let's resume. And I'm like, you cannot just, you know, in January you are signing up for a program, and in, say, June, July, you're coming to me and you're like, oh, let's do what where we left. You know, there is some code of ethics that you need to follow, some work ethics that you need to follow. And I had, as I, because I maintained the attendance register, I showed it to my client, that's, you know, see, these are the number of sessions that you did, these are the number of sessions that were not done. But 6 months is a long gap. But I realized that it was my mistake that I did not mention it anywhere. The validity of these 13 sessions has to do with how much period or how many number of days you can avail these sessions. um, I had heard some hurtful remarks and all of that from the client, but again, I realized it was something that I had to put it out there, because in my mind, I had assumed that, you know, oh, people value time, so they will stick, they will adhere to the timelines, they'll adhere to the time and all of that. And a lot of times I have experienced, Jenna, that if it's say 9 o'clock 9 p.m. session, so which means I'm blocking my calendar for you, right? So I'm leaving everything aside and blocking my calendar, I'm leaving my other clients and blocking it for you, and people don't turn up. And these are personal sessions I'm speaking about, so which means I have blocked the calendar for one single person, leaving everybody else aside, and people, they don't turn up. So, you know, so this was one of the challenge that I faced initially. And I realized that, you know, I need to be very particular with the terms and conditions of the session, because, you know, sometimes, or they'll join in at 9:15 and then you're expected to do till 10:15. But what about if I have another session at 10 o'clock, a following session? So everything goes for a toss, right? And there was another instance where then I learned from that. I made the rules, I added the terms and conditions, I communicated it whenever people used to sign up. But then this time, one person seemed to make an impulsive decision of buying my program on my website. And within 1 hour of registering, that person was harassing me to refund the money,
Dear.
because it was, the decision that the person had taken was an error. That's what I was told. And I'm like, but it's written out there that once you've made the payment, once you've purchased the course, you'll not get the refund, because you have to make an informed decision, or you have a word with me, right? Try to understand. Let's have a chat before you make the purchase any program for that matter. I'm there to communicate. I'm there to talk to you. And that was, I think, one challenging situation for me, where I kept getting these messages time and again for the refund. Um, to the extent that I actually thought that should I seek some legal help, because, you know, uh, I also tried to make the person understand that, you know, whatever the reasons are for you because of which you think it's an impulsive decision, let's, now that since you've already purchased, let's get on the session, try to understand, maybe it's something to do that you need to work on, let's do it. And I would religiously wait at the blocked time, the person had chosen, and I would religiously wait. I did that for I think 10 days. The person did not turn up.
Oh, so you did show up for the session, and that person did
Yes.
block a session slot.
Yes,
Oh, so
yes. So the
that's
person purchased the
unbelievable.
session, blocked my calendar, and then wanted a refund. Despite all of this chaotic discussion, I told the person that, okay, sometimes we are so much in our head, we end up having these conversations, and later we realize, oh, we shouldn't have done that. So I kind of gave that benefit of doubt to the person that maybe the person is going through something. So, let me just have a word. How much can you chat in messages? It's always better to have uh, communication face to face virtually. And I told the person that, hey, listen, you've already blocked my calendar. At least come for one call. Let us have one call and see why this behavior is coming up for you. And the person never turned up and just kept asking for refund. And I think that was the wake up call for me to put down the terms and conditions to the T as transparent as I can. Because, I felt that how can I say that, if you don't join in 10 minutes, I will not, I'll disconnect or these things because sometimes you get late and this and that. But I was like, no, I think if these are the kind of experiences I keep getting, I need to be very vocal about my terms and conditions.
Absolutely. And I'm happy that you're bringing this up because so many people may be facing this in whichever
Yes,
other professions or situations that they are in, and they probably don't know, especially as women. I think we are very scared of
yes,
being assertive in this way, like, I'm sorry, take it or leave it, that way.
yeah.
And the final question to just close up this section, Sneha, what would you say are the pain points that you face in your profession? Not from a business angle also, but also from a legal compliance documentation angle.
I think again in this case, so when I was starting my business, I was googling out that what are the legal procedures, any legal procedures if I need to follow, anything else that I need to in terms of registration and all of that. Of course my education background did help me a lot, but there are people who don't know, right? So and sometimes you are just starting out your business and you want to see how it goes and then take a decision. So I think in that case, what pain points I faced was there was lack of structured information on a platform. And see, in again, you might get the information, but it always helps if there's a human touch to it. By that, what I mean is if there's somebody to guide you, to assist you with respect to the challenges or with respect to what business you are in, right? Today, the coaching business that I'm in will have different requirements. Somebody who is into some other business, say even financial services business for that matter, will have some other requirements. So I think having structured information, structured documentation also with a human touch was one of the biggest pain points for me. I'd like to share one more scenario here. So when I
Yes.
started with Arvinda, a lot of people said, "Oh, you're just starting it as a hobby, all what women hear, right?" And I was like, "No, I am not starting it as a hobby. It's like a legit business. It's a legit venture." And I wanted to register my logo, register the name, and everything. And information was out there on the internet. I'll not deny that, but I struggled with assistance. I managed to get some reference of someone who would do the registration for me and all of that, but I did not have a good experience with the person because there was lack of communication. The communication was not transparent, and till today, my application for registration is still pending. So I think that human touch with
Yeah.
structured documentation and information is something that I think will help a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'm consistently seeing, I have also faced because I was a legal counsel, so a litigant for the court system, is finding good lawyers, finding
Yeah,
good legal help, good agents to help you for registration. Like, I know that it is a real problem. Hopefully we will be able to do something with it with the kind of plans that we have, but at the moment, yeah, I see that that is a pain point, not just for you but even for me, despite all the advantages that I have. So
like for example, I'm sorry.
no, go on, of course.
I mean, see, earlier, even when it comes to doctors, we would just go by word of mouth what people are saying. But today we have platforms like Practo, and where you have customer reviews. Of course, there will be cases where you don't have good experiences, but most of the times I've seen, if you go by you have at least you have a platform where you can see it's like a yellow pages for doctors, right? So it comes in, it is so helpful. You can read the reviews, at least you are able to take an informed decision, right?
You spoke to my heart. Hopefully, with God willing, all that will happen.
Definitely,
Uh,
definitely.
so we finished the main sort of meat of the podcast, but the last section is something I do for myself more than anything else because I love hearing the answers that people give. So it's called 5 4 3 2 1. Like I ask you five of something, four of something, three of
Okay,
something, like that.
okay.
So 5 productivity tips or routines or apps or things that have helped you.
I don't know if it comes to five, but I'll share the productivity tips that have helped me is I like to break down bigger tasks into smaller, actionable items. Something I learned from this book called Atomic Habits. So, what has helped me in the last couple, especially in the last couple of years, is setting goals for the entire year and then breaking it down into months, into weeks, and as I said, putting in actionable items against these goals. And the second thing that helps me is journaling every day. Uh, journaling, like, a lot of times when I say people that, oh, I journal, and they're like, oh, what do you journal about? What do you write? So I think it's also subjective. It's different for every individual. Like, for example, if I'm working on myself, I could journal about my growth, my self growth, or if there's some specific habit I need to work on. Like, for example, I had in 2019 when I was going through depression, I used to do a lot of binge eating and emotional eating. It was a result of what I was experiencing. So I had to switch to a healthier, my old way of eating, the old habits of eating. So I maintained my habit tracker. I ensured to journal about it every day. What made me eat that junk food? What made me choose a junk item over a healthy item? So journaling could be on anything that you want to work on. Journaling is another one, and the next one is ensuring that I am consistent with the habits that I want for the rest of my life, to build that lifestyle for the rest of my life, to be consistent for at least 4 to 5 days in a week, which means approximately 70 to 75% of the week. And if you see the compounding effect, it comes to 75% of the days in a year. You have that leeway so that you're not too harsh on yourself. Because when we are too harsh on ourselves, I feel I have experienced the productivity goes down because you're spending that uh, time and energy to being so hard on yourself that you kind of forget putting in the efforts that you would have done otherwise. So yeah, these are the main things that help me stay productive. And I
And
enjoy
meditation.
writing because it gives me transparency for everything, not just in my business, but even in my life. So yeah,
And meditation.
of course, that goes without saying.
It comes to five now. So you've said all five.
Okay,
4 books that you recommend to anyone.
okay. Uh, it's not in the rank of order, but 4 books that have really helped me in the last 2 years. First is The One Thing, which really helps you to understand how to prioritize. The next is Atomic Habits, helps you understand how to build the habits that you want to. The next one is Do Epic Shit. It's like, you flip through any page and there's something you will learn.
We'll just give the authors as well. Like Do Epic Shit is, I think, Ankur Warikoo.
Yeah.
And
And
Atomic
Atomic
Habits,
Habits is
James
James
Clear.
Clear.
And the one
One
thing is
thing,
Gary. What's a
yeah,
I don't remember the second name. There are 2 of them, right? But
yeah, there are 2 authors, yeah,
we'll put it in the
in
description or
description,
something. Yeah.
yeah. And the last one is Breathe, Believe, Balance. This one is by Shamal Vallabhji. It is like you are actually speaking to a counselor or a therapist. Because it will ask you, it has such questions or such analogies in the book that it will probe you to think from a different perspective. It will probe you to introspect. So I think that's a wonderful book, especially for people who want to go to a counselor, but for XYZ reasons they're not going. I think this is a wonderful book. In
Which,
fact, I had even done an Instagram live with him, which was really insightful conversation.
oh wow, lovely. I haven't read this book, but maybe we should link your Instagram live also now when
Yeah,
we are
I'll
linking
share
your,
the link with you.
yeah, when we are linking the show notes. Okay. Three tips that you would like to give young graduates or students. I know I share a lot of my pain working with them, but what do you have to say?
I think first one is don't hesitate to experiment and take risks early in your career, because explore as many options as you can, as many options as you want, because as and when you have more responsibilities, like it or not, there are certain restrictions there. Second is, even if you are failing when you're experimenting, when you're exploring, don't take those failures too hard. Just remember that, there is definitely something that you learn from every failure also. You might not learn it or you might not be able to see it immediately, but it's definitely going to teach you something. Uh, and the next one is, don't run behind instant gratification, because I think social media has rewired our brain in such a way that we are looking for instant gratification everywhere, because of which we are moving from one career to another career, moving, like we they also struggle with taking decisions because of these instant, this feel of being gratified. So I think just be a little patient. Don't run behind instant gratification. So if so one analogy that I generally share and keep reminding myself also when I tend to get impatient with something is, uh, if, for example, if I have to go from India to, say, London, there is a minimum duration, right, that I will have to take, right? There are different modes of there are different modes of transport I can choose. There are different flight options that are available, but I'll choose the fastest flight. But still, I need to take that shortest duration flight also, right? Even if I fly and go, I will require those 8, 9 hours. So there is no escape to that. Or when during pregnancy, you have to go through those 8, 9 months. There is no shortcut to it, right? There is no instant result in either of the cases. So it's instant gratification is not going to help you to lead anywhere.
True, very true. Something we all have to remember as well. Not
Yeah.
just the youngsters or the not youngsters, we are also young, but not just the students or the young
Yeah.
graduates. Okay. Two life lessons that you have learned in your life so far.
Okay. Um, I've learned two life lessons, but I ended up, the second life lesson gave me the third lesson, so I'll share all the three lessons. First one is, mind is your biggest asset. Don't let it turn into a liability. It might seem like a chart accountant language,
Oh
but
no,
it's actually the truth, the fact.
absolutely
The second one is love and accept your own self for the way you are. There's always, every individual is going through a growth process, whether it's a slow growth, whether it's a fast growth, doesn't matter. But if you can't love and accept yourselves, then it's very unfair when we expect other people to love and accept us for who we are, right? So once you start doing this second advice or whatever you call it, I learned my third lesson is, you have the highest power of making your own self happy. You might have the best people in the world, the best things in the world, but if you are not happy, if you're not exercising the inner power to be happy, it's not going to give you happiness.
very true. So true. slowly we are learning these lessons. But
Yeah, because I think it's a learning process for
yeah,
each one of us in
yeah,
some way or the other.
yeah, and we have to find our ways to it ourselves,
Yeah.
because we are, I think, somewhere also conditioned to blame the external, like
Yes.
from the time we are kids. So I
Yeah.
think to first of all accept that responsibility itself is difficult, and then start working on it. But
Yeah.
once you realize, there is truly nothing more powerful and transformational than this one realization.
Yeah.
And last, what is the best advice that you have ever received?
I think the best advice has to be the one I received from my mom, which were her last word. Not technically her last words, but just 2 hours before she passed away, was, do not get attached to anything or any situation or even to your own ego for that matter. Because attachment is going to bring you misery. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that, you're very detached, like, whatever, let people do whatever they want. Be affectionately detached, and it is only going to give you joy and happiness, not just for yourself, but even for people around. And it was much later in life, Jenna, that I actually understood the meaning of what she said. And I just experienced the beauty of shifting from an attitude of attachment to affectionate detachment, because there's so much of negative thought process or perspective behind this word detachment. We think that, oh, if a person is detached, he's selfish. But being affectionately detached is something that I realized much later in life. In fact, I even ended up writing a blog on that, on how we can bring that affectionate detachment.
That's okay. So that's another thing we link,
Okay.
is the blog and your live, because I also want to read that book. Out of the 4 books, 3 I have read, but
Okay.
one I have not. So that I will read. But
Okay.
when you spoke about affectionate detachment, I just want, like, I think one can also, for someone who probably is struggling to understand what does this affectionate detachment really mean, maybe it can, do you agree that it can also be said as a sort of a lack of judgment, like being involved in life, as in being involved in relationships in life, but without having judgment or expectations of either
Yes.
the situation or your, your,
Yeah.
so
Simple example. I mean, if that's what you wanted to lead to, uh, say for example, in friendship or uh, even between spouses, we are like, oh, why is this person not doing this, or why is this person not accepting me, or accepting certain things. But if we bring that shift that, every individual is different, and accept them for their differences, and still be affectionate towards them, and not impose the expectations on them, will change the dynamics of a relationship. Be it any relationship, I think even a parent and a child relationship for that matter.
very true. Swami Chinmayananda says that disappointment comes when you have an appointment with the future. So
Yeah,
I think we probably can substitute the word disappointment with attach, like this. When you talk about attachment, you want
yeah,
that person or that situation to behave in a particular way.
yeah,
So you do have an appointment with the future, in the sense that I want that
yeah. I
outcome.
want that. Yeah.
Yeah. So very true.
And I think as humans, we can't say, oh, I do not have any expectation. I mean, come on, I don't know, unless you've reached that enlightened stage, we all have expectations, right? To some extent. But I think taking it too seriously, taking it too personally and to your heart, I think is where the problems start coming in.
Absolutely. And also, I think these kind of reminders help you process what's happening also, because each
That's
one of
where
us,
mindfulness
yes,
helps you a lot, right? Because
absolutely.
mindfulness is what? Wherein you are aware of the present moment without any judgment, just observing life as it is flowing through you, right? So if you are being non-judgmental in the moment, and you're being an observer, you'll be able to observe these things, right? Even you'll be able to observe your own thought processes, the patterns, the way you are reacting, and once you are aware is when you can make a change, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, Sneha, thank you so much. It was such a wonderful conversation with you, as always. But what I really liked is that I think you have given a lot of information and helpful information, not just information as in you're sharing your journey, but also tips for the for whoever is listening, which is very relatable in various areas of our lives, not just something that you went through. I don't need to necessarily be in your shoes to find what you said being very relevant. So thank you again. You've been very generous with your time. I know you're not feeling well, but even then you showed up. So I'm really grateful to you and enjoy
Much, Jenna. I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity for building this platform where, we can normalize these conversations, change the perspectives, change the narratives for common people like us, because, we are influenced by a lot of things which are not relevant in today's time. And it takes a lot of efforts to, do what you're doing. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for bringing up this topic so that I was able to share this information, my experience, my learnings, and I hope this conversation helps people the way we intended.
Yes, I do. And for anyone who is listening, please write to us and tell us if it is helping you. All our handles, mine and Sneha's, and all of the other things that we said, we
Definitely.
link. It'll be all there. We'll link it in the show notes. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenna.